Hello everyone, it's Mrs. Schmidt here to discuss evaluating an algebraic expression. You've seen this word this year, evaluating, and I've had some questions here or there like, what does that mean, Mrs. Schmidt? What does it mean? I've purposely been using it in directions as we went so you'd be more familiar with it. If you look closely, can you kind of hear the word value in the word evaluating? Well, the value of something is how much it's worth. So if they're asking for us to evaluate this expression, they want us to know, what is this expression worth? So if you read this sentence, it says, to evaluate an algebraic expression, substitute a number for each variable. Then use the order of operations to find the value of the numerical expression. Substitute. Substitute literally means when you put something in place of what's there, or to replace something with. So if Mrs. Schmidt's absent, who shows up? A substitute shows up. So what are we going to do? Evaluate k plus 10 when k equals 5. So you are going to, instead of k plus 10, you are going to substitute in 25 in, because they say we want k to be 25. So see, the blue writing tells us kind of what's happening. Substitute 25 in for k. So instead of k plus 10, it's 25 plus 10. And then we're simply going to evaluate it. Add. 25 plus 10 is 35. Evaluate 4 times n when n equals 12. Okay? First step, substitute it in. So instead of 4 times n, you're going to write 4 times, what did they want n to be? 12. 4 times 12. Substitute for n. Now we're going to evaluate 4 times 12, 48. Let me do these examples in your spiral so I can demonstrate for you kind of the expectation for how you should show your work. If you have 24 plus c, and they want c to equal 9. They want us to evaluate that algebraic expression, find the value of that. So what's that going to be? Instead of 24 plus c, we will write 24 plus 9. And then underneath it, we'll write 33. So really, after the first step of substituting in, all you do, you should look just like when we were learning order of operations. You solve in order. Now there was only one operation, so it only took one step to complete, but it will get more difficult. Let's take a look at another one. D minus 17 said when D equals 30. Okay, so step number 1, substitute in the value of the variable. So now I'm going to write 30 minus 17. 30 take away the 10 is 20. Take away 7 more is just 13. So the value of that expression when d equals 30 is 13. What happens when you don't just have one variable, you have 2 variables? Let's look at this one. Evaluate a divided by b when a is 16 and b is 2/3. Okay, so you're going to substitute a 16 in anytime you see a. And you're going to put 2/3 in anytime you see b. Then you'll use the order of operation to solve. So let's take a look. You should not be using calculators on this. It's good to review your operations with decimals and fractions. And so you should not be using calculators. Okay, evaluate a divided by b. If a equals 16 and b equals 2/3. All right, so instead of a, I'm going to write 16 divided by, instead of b, I'm going to write 2/3. All right, well, I see I'm dividing with and by a fraction, so I'm very thankful that I understand reciprocals, and I know that dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to ketchup, mustard, ranch this question, which if you remember, that stands for keep it multiply by the reciprocal. I'm going to pre-simplify. 1 and 3 have no common factors to pre-simplify by. 16 and 2 do. They can both be divided by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now, surfer across the top, scuba diver across the bottom. 8 times 3 is 24. Over 1 times 1, 1. So my answer is 24. Now, that one was a little bit more involved, but that's only because we were reviewing dividing with fractions. It probably wasn't as hard because of the substitution part. It was more reviewing and remembering what you had to do with fractions. I did notice that there was a study tip that we didn't talk about. These are always really important, and I notice a lot of kids will skip over these. Study tip. You can write the product of 4 and n in several ways. Remember, product means multiply. So it's important that you notice that you can say 4 times n with a dot, 4 times n with the 4 as the coefficient just touching the variable, or 4 times n. If the number is just touching a parenthesis, they're saying multiply it by whatever the value is inside the parenthesis. So there's 3 ways you can write multiplication. What you're not going to do is you're not going to write multiplication with an x, not in algebra, because if you're multiplying by an x, it also happens to look just like x, the variable. So that's really confusing. So especially in algebra, we never really use the multiplication symbol of the x. We will use 4 times n as a dot, a coefficient, or as a number touching the parentheses. This next example is going to show how you can evaluate an algebraic expression that has more than one variable, as well as those variables being multiplied together with no symbol. First thing, substituting for your variables. You will often see if people are substituting in its multiplication, people will often use the parentheses. So you'll see wherever I see a p, 24 times 8. That again just means multiplication. When there's no symbols and they're just touching multiplication. Could I have written 24.8? Sure. But that's very common. So 24 times 8. You have 2 choices. You can use your strategies to figure that out mentally, or you could say, all right, I'm just going to come off to the side real quick and do multiplication. So your answer was 192. But I should see some sort of strategy or work, hopefully, that you could kind of figure out. All right, I think you got this. You're going to nail it. Have a great night, guys, and I can't wait to see how you do. Take it easy.